As we continue our studies in Romans chapter 12, we invite you to study with us as we read verses 6 through 8 as the means to illustrate some very important principles about our service in God's kingdom. While you are turning to Romans chapter 12, again finding verses 6 through 8, I want you to think about something that is often mentioned in the business world. Perhaps you have been impacted by this. Many companies have something called a non-compete clause. And what that simply means is that as an employee, you have valuable information that they don't want you to share with others. And because of that, you agree that if you were to seek other employment for whatever reason, that you may not work in the same industry or in proximity to that industry. Some states don't really enforce that, but states like Missouri, for example, are very strict about it. As we think about those non-compete clauses, I want you to think about that spiritually. Number one, we ought not be in the position or the mindset that we're trying to outdo each other. Our non-compete clause is that I'm not trying to outdo you, and you're not trying to outdo me. We're not trying to outpreach one another, or outsing one another, or outserve one another. We also agree that we won't be envious or jealous of one another. We agree that what we do is for the sheer glory and honor of God. So we're not looking to compete, we're looking to cooperate. And we're looking to do it with the character that is consistent with the God that we serve. In Romans chapter 12, starting in verse 6, having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, whether prophecy, let us prophesy according to the proportion of faith, or ministry, let us wait on our ministering, or he that teacheth on teaching, or he that exhorteth on exhortation. He that giveth, let him do it with simplicity. He that ruleth with diligence. He that showeth mercy with cheerfulness. As we look at Romans chapter 12, verses 6 through 8 mentions 7 different offices or works in the kingdom. Those things are important in understanding the work of the early church, but more importantly, in the spirit in which the work was to be done, and an example to us. For example, the Bible talks about prophecy. That was the person who declared God's will. It was a temporary office. Ministry, that's one who served and acted in the behalf or the best interests of others. Teaching, that's the person who instructs, provides knowledge of God's word. Exhortation, that references building and encouraging others, and perhaps even warning them. Giving references distributing to the needs of others. Ruleth speaketh to the person who has authority over others. Mercy has reference to the benevolent care and concern of the sick. Now, as you look at Romans 12, verses 6 through 8, I want to make mention of some important things to not only understand what was meant to the church at Rome, but ultimately to us. First of all, these are examples and not an exhaustive list of how people can serve in God's kingdom. Sometimes when we see things and we say, well, I'm not on that list, or in this case, my gift is not on that list. This is only a sampling to illustrate the principles, not necessarily meant to be anything and everything that a person can probably do. The second thing that I want you to notice, which is so important to understanding why we are to not compete spiritually, is that the emphasis is not so much on what a person is doing, but it is on the spirit in which it is to be done. For example, when he talks about prophecy in Romans 12 and 6, he says to the proportion of faith. That simply means that you have to use what God gave you, how God gave it to you. You can't out prophesy somebody or try to one up them in being a more articulate or more prolific speaker. You have to do it according to what God gave you. In ministry, he talks about the idea of let us wait on our ministering. That simply means that we have to prioritize the service that is done for others. It's easy to prioritize what we want, but we need to prioritize what we give to others. When it comes to teaching, and he talks about on teaching, that means you have to focus on the development of others. In our exhortation, the idea there means to be known as a person who encourages, to be known as a person who builds. On giving, he uses the word simplicity. That simply means to have integrity in the distribution of the needs to others. In Ruleth, when he talks about diligence, that word diligence means to do it caring and to do it with a gentle heart, gentle spirit. In the gift of mercy, he mentions cheerfulness. That means that your attitude impacts those that you are serving. The merciful person is the person who is working with an individual who's sick or down and out or have lost their way. And though you can do nice things for them, you need to do nice things with a nice heart, a nice disposition. So again, the emphasis is not on whether or not a person is to prophesy or to minister, teach, exhort, give, rule, or be merciful. The emphasis is on what type of spirit you have when you do what you do. You see, people can do the right things and still be wrong in their heart. For example, if you took a preacher who determined that he was simply trying to out-preach everybody and stroke his ego with his preaching and wow the crowd, it might be effective in communicating the message, but it's ineffective because it communicates that his heart is depraved. It's not about competing. It's about serving with the right spirit. If you took a song leader and the song leader says, I am going to make them love me, I'm going to tap into their emotions. Well, they may be effective at singing and hitting the notes, but they're ineffective when their spirit is about what it does for them and not how it honors God. So the idea in these verses is not to determine are you the prophet or are you the exhorter or are you the merciful person. The emphasis here is that in whatever we do, we must not only do the right things, but we must have the right spirit about what we do. There are a lot of times people do the right things and God does not credit to them that as good because they have the wrong spirit about doing it. This is an encouragement to work within your scope of gifts according to the grace, as is mentioned here in Romans chapter 12. The according to grace. That simply means that God has measured, God has distributed a portion to you. That simply means that what God has given, He has determined that that's what He wants you to have. So you can't really compete because you're competing with God when you think you're competing with someone else. It's never about competition. It's always about cooperation. How do we work together for the benefit of the kingdom? So from this, I want you to think about three things. Number one, what has God gifted you to do? Don't look at how much God has given someone else or how He's gifted someone else. You have been gifted by God. What is your gift? Second, think about how you discharge your duty. Your spirit, your attitude, your disposition, the character of who you are means more than what you do. It's how you do it. And number three, think about how you serve Him by serving others. God never gives us a gift for selfless purposes. It is always for the best interests of others. We are not in competition as Christians. We are in a cooperative union for the benefit of others and for the glory of God. Men will judge our actions, but God will judge our character. This has been another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister.